stories of paranormal investigations. A Ghost is the most advanced technical paranormal research group in the Pacific Northwest. During paranormal investigations, the team combines high-tech equipment with qualified psychics, research, and training for successful results. Each member of our investigation team has been thoroughly trained in their areas of responsibility. A Ghost has earned the respect of some of the most important names in the paranormal field. As the ghost hunters, they've made it their quest to provide substantial evidence that we are not alone in the dark. What is it that goes bump in the night and gives you the feeling of being watched when you're all alone? Ross Allison has been investigating the paranormal for close to 30 years. His work as an investigator, author, and expert in the field has taken him all over to some of the most renowned sites in the world. So take it away, Ross.
All right. So I'll kind of briefly go a little bit more into a little bit of who I am, in case you missed some of that. But that is me, yes. I am the only full-time ghost hunter in the Pacific Northwest. I also am the founder of A Ghost. I also teach at University of Washington Ghostology 101, 201, and 301. And I've hosted the series Unknown Truth. I'm a member of the Society of the Supernatural, lecture all over the world. I am also a tour guide at Spook in Seattle Tours. So if you ever want to take one of our tours, check that out. We've actually been voted as one of the top tours in America. Yeah, that's amazing for such a young city, definitely.
Is it all ages?
All ages, yes, definitely. We even take you ghost hunting too. Yeah. Now, I also have the Death Museum. We're the first death museum in the Northwest as well. So if you like that creepy element, you know, death-related stuff, vintage coffins, mourning dresses, we have a whole collection of that. And I've also done the Angry Ghost Hunter show. I've been featured in the magazines all over, and I also am an author as well. Yes, I write nonfiction, and of course, these are my books: Ghostology 101, Spook in Seattle, Tacoma's Haunted History, My Haunted Journal, Psychology for the Ghost Hunter, Haunted Toys. The latest one is Haunted Ships and Lighthouses. Soon to come out is Haunted Amusement Parks and Haunted Sex. Wait till that lecture comes out.
Great covers.
Thank you. I actually am a graphic artist as well. So. All right. So how I got involved in ghosts? Well, I blame my mother. Yes, there are some things you can't blame your parents for, and my mother loves ghost stories. So I grew up listening to these stories, and I was very fascinated with that. I wanted to know, do people really experience this stuff? Because it's crazy what I'm hearing out there. So that's what really got my curiosity going in this field. Now, I started looking into other groups. I lived in California, so I got to work with a few of the big names out there. And this is before ghost hunting was as big as it is today. Now, I put close to 30 years into this field, and it was Halloween of 2000. I had just moved back to Washington, and I wanted to do some ghost hunting. But there weren't any ghost hunting groups at the time. So I just got on the phone and started calling all my buddies and said, hey guys, there's this great cemetery down the street, let's go check it out. And they're like, yeah, but let's hit the bars first. Yeah, bunch of drunks in the cemetery, right? Not a good idea. Yeah. So, I thought there's got to be other people that are very serious about this. I really want to know what's going out there. So a friend of mine just said, why don't you start your own group? So I did. I started A Ghost. Now, a little bit about A Ghost. We are one of the most technically advanced groups out there. We are developing new tools. We travel all over the world. In fact, we just got back from Italy. We spent 3 weeks out there. It was amazing. We got to do haunted castles and the crypts and all that stuff. We've done over 700 cases and 600 expeditions in the 18 years that we've been around. We have a working partnership with the Ghost Club, which is the oldest ghost hunting group in the world. They're based in London, founded back in 1862. Yeah, we have the largest media archive out there. We have an actual paranormal research lab. And of course, we've been seen in media all over the place. From radio, newspaper, magazines, television, and these are just some of the other highlights of some of the things that I've appeared in. But most recently, I've done work for the Travel Channel. In fact, last Saturday, I was on Ghost Adventures, if you watched that episode. But I've done shows like Most Terrifying Places in America, Mysteries at the Museum, and Hotel Secrets and Legends. But last year, I had the privilege of being actually on a pilot for a show called Freaky Sweets on the Food Network. So I'm a ghost hunter featured on the Food Network. Right? Now, I'll show you this little pilot.
When people want to keep this wild, outrageous, or just plain odd, guys, let's go make a cake.
Right.
job.
Amazing.
Get on, no pun intended. I'm Barbara Ann Kim, and along with my team, I create some of the creepiest cakes in the world.
In fact, that aired last year, and I found out they're re-airing it this year. Yeah, so it's kind of cool.
Let me get a little more volume here, you guys.
Some of these clips are actually the ones
So
that are a little
what
bit better.
channel was Freaky Sweet on?
Food Network.
Food Network.
Yep, and it's airing again. Alright, so you have also might have seen me at Ghostomentary. That's actually on Amazon, and I'm actually working on a series that's going to be done in VR. And it's, so let me show you just a quick sweep of this. Northwest Haunts. So if anybody's ever done VR, it's kind of cool. Puts you right there in the scene. So we're actually doing a lot of filming on that as well. Now, moving on. What makes a good ghost hunter? Well, I always say it's the PDP. And what that means is the passion, devotion, and patience. And that's being passionate about what you do, be patient in waiting for it to come, and be devoted in making it happen for you. Also, honesty is going to be very important as well. You don't need to make up stories to get people to believe you. And education, learn as much as you can about this field. And of course, have an open mind. But you also want a fair share of skepticism, because you don't want to go into a haunted place and start pointing at every little strange thing and say, ooh, that's a ghost. Oh, that's definitely a ghost. Because a lot of this stuff can be explained. And that's what we try to do as paranormal investigators. We try to explain it first before we label it as possible paranormal activity. Now, ghosts today. How many have actually seen a ghost? Raise your hand. See some of you going like,
Great story.
All right. Well, how many of you believe they exist? You guys can make this easy on me, so that's good. All right. Now, I always get asked, do I believe in ghosts? Well, I've been in this field long enough and have had enough experience to know there is something going on out there. But I'm not one of those ghost hunters that's going to tell you, yes, they exist, and you need to believe. Because really, you have to experience it for yourself. I could have the best evidence of a ghost walking right up to the camera going, boo, I'm a ghost. But if you don't believe in ghosts, you're just going to judge my credibility. So really, you have to experience it for yourself before you make that final decision. So all I try to do is open people's minds to that idea. Well, 89% of people believe in miracles, 68% believe in the devil, 31% believe in astrology, and 27% believe in reincarnation. Now, when they did a poll on ghosts back in '99, they found that 48% of society believed in ghosts. But then they did a more recent poll, and they found that it's now grown to 62%. So the belief in ghosts is continuing to grow. Now, the interesting part of this is they believe that 60% of those are women. So it's a great field to be in if you're a single guy. Now, it's 1 out of 6 people believe that they've actually had an experience with a ghost. So we get into the history of all this. Now, all cultures believe in some form of afterlife. In fact, it's become the basis for most religions. And almost from the beginning of time, man has talked about ghosts. You have ancient Greeks, Egyptians, Romans, even Shakespeare wrote about ghosts. And the 1st century AD was when the first ghost stories were written. And early Hebrew scriptures talk about the living trying to contact the dead. Well, communicating with ghosts actually became very popular back in the 1850s. Does anybody know why? Spiritualism. Yeah. Spiritualism had begun. And this was the big following of all these mediums popping up left and right, claiming that they could actually talk to ghosts. Yeah. So by the early 1900s, ghost hunting had begun. Because you had all these mediums popping up, claiming to make contact with the other side, people wanted to find out, can they validate that? So that's when we started ghost hunting. But by the 1950s, it had all died out. And the reason for this is because a lot of those mediums actually were proven to be fakes. And science was at hand. So a lot of people didn't want to accept this as reality. Well, back in 2004, it's back again. Anybody know why? No? Ghost Hunters, Eric. Yeah. Once Ghost Hunters actually hit the Sci-Fi Channel, this made ghost hunting very popular. Everybody wanted to be a ghost hunter. Yeah, it's the new rock and roll. Because you have to understand, when I started this field, it was very most likely that you didn't tell people openly that you were a ghost hunter. Otherwise, you were alone at the party. Alright? Now, when you tell people you're a ghost hunter, everybody wants to hear your stories. You become very popular at the party. So we blame Hollywood. But how much is really fact or fiction? Well, everybody loves a good ghost story. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, we all like to scare each other every once in a while, right? But unfortunately, there are no proton packs or ghost traps. And to develop tools like that, you have to know what a ghost is made of. We don't know this. We're still exploring a lot of this stuff. But I do have to tell you one thing. We learned one very important rule due to Ghostbusters. Don't cross the streams. Right? But the movies have taught us to fear ghosts. They're out to get us, to harm us, or to even kill us. But it's really our own imagination that scares us the most. We're the ones that are going to be creeping around in an old place, get scared, turn around and run, fall down the stairs, break both of your legs, and you say the ghost pushed you. Right? But this also begins with our obsession with death. In fact, we've been obsessed with death since the very beginning. We don't want to believe that death is truly the end. There's got to be a purpose, a reason for the living. Well, as we question our immortality, we start to get into the art of dying. Now, the best way to die was basically to die at home without pain, with your family and loved ones around you. But unfortunately, we're not guaranteed that. We don't know how we're going to expire. But death customs opened up a lot of doors into this. In fact, death in the 19th century carried a lot of these medieval customs. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, just to kind of show you how morbid we actually are. Yeah. Now, I do have to forewarn you that some of these images can be very upsetting. All right? Now, unfortunately, there is no nudity. Okay? But the death mask. Now, this is a plaster or wax mask made of somebody right after they passed away. And this is a way to remember exactly how they looked. Again, you didn't have photography back in those days. Now, in fact, these are examples of some death masks made from victims that were murdered, and they couldn't identify the bodies, so they made the death masks and they hung them in the center of town. Then you'll have the deathbed scene. And this is where everybody would come around and they would visit you while you were on your deathbed. And a lot of times they'd have the artist do a rendering of some sort or a sculpture of you in your deathbed. In fact, it was a huge honor to be a part of a deathbed scene. Yeah. In fact, this is Abraham Lincoln's deathbed scene. Yeah. Postmortem photography. What looks like sweet, innocent photos are indeed photos of the dead. Yeah. Now, this was very popular once photography came around. But you have to understand that photography was a new technology. And we've learned that when it's new, it's very expensive. And not everybody has access to this technology as well. Well, what they did is they wanted to have photos taken of the dead. Because this is probably the only photo ever taken of that person. But now it's become a missed opportunity. You didn't get them while they were still alive. So what they'd do is they'd prop them up and pull off this illusion as if they were still alive. Like in this photo, they'd put them in a seat. And you'd see a little mechanism that pulled them up. Or they'll actually have them standing up. Same thing, just to make it look as if they were still alive. In fact, in Europe, they would remove your eyes and replace them with glass eyes to give you that more of that lifelike look. Yeah. But it was very popular amongst children. In fact, if you go online and look, you'll see thousands and thousands of photos of children out there. Because children were dying so commonly back in those days. And you wanted to have that last memento of that child. These are examples of those photos. Now, times have changed. In fact, by the late 19th century, people developed new views on death, and it no longer had to be such a public event. You could actually mourn in privacy. And you could actually just invite your loved ones and your friends. Yeah, you didn't have to invite the whole village or everybody in town to come check out your dead. And it became a time as to what was respectful and what wasn't. Now, I'm going to share one of my experiences with you guys. I actually investigated this place known as the Queen Anne Hotel. Now this opened up in the 1890s as Mary Lake School for Girls. And this was a proper place for young ladies to learn how to be a proper young lady, all right? Now unfortunately Mary Lake died a few years after the school had opened. And it went through quite a few different changes. But by the 1980s, it actually started becoming a hotel. Okay. Now, the most active room is what used to be Mary Lake's room. All right. Now, Mary Lake is very known to be a very flirtatious ghost. Yes, there are stories of touching and kissing. In fact, she's well known that if you happen to pass out on top of the covers, you'll be awoken by a blanket tucked all the way around you to the point where you can barely move. Now, we had access to the room for the night. I was a single guy, so I decided I'm going to stay in the room. But we also have a strict rule that we cannot investigate alone, because for a couple reasons. One, for safety, and the other is for credibility reasons. If somebody has an experience, it's always better to have a witness there to validate your experience. So I figured, okay, if I'm staying in the room, maybe I should have another guy stay in the room, because now this gives her options, all right? So I asked one of the other guys to see if he would like to join me in this room. Well, this other member was new. This was his first outing with us, so he was a little terrified. Yeah. So I said, okay, I'll make this deal with you. I will be the guinea pig. I will sleep on top of the covers, and hopefully I'll have the experience of the cover tucked all the way around me. I said, you can go ahead and sleep under the covers. Well, he agrees to this. Well, late into the night, he's too afraid, and he leaves me alone in the room. Yeah. Later, I'm awoken by what feels like an icy hand going down my back, followed by a scream. Now, I quickly turn around, and I see the back of the head of somebody in bed with me. So I start to yell. I'm like, who are you? What are you doing? Why are you touching me? And after a moment of silence, I finally hear a voice. And he goes, Ross? What's going on? Well, apparently, I dreamt that he had left me alone in the room. And now he's too terrified to turn around to see who I was yelling at. I know I was yelling in his direction. Well, that scream, apparently it came from me. So the whole next day I kept hearing from all the other guests of the hotel, oh my God, did you hear that woman scream last night? So getting technical, why do ghosts wear clothes? Now a lot of people think, oh, maybe this is what they died in, or maybe this is what they were buried in, or this could have been their favorite outfit. Well, we're going to do a little experiment here, all right? I want you all to close your eyes. Right? Don't worry, I'm not going to reach out and grab you. But seriously, close your eyes. And I want you to picture yourself in a room. Now I have to ask, how many of you are naked? Usually one or two people put up their hands. It's all right. You can open your eyes now. What we believe is how you see yourself is how you project yourself as a ghost. Because we don't see ourselves naked. Yeah. Now, another interesting fact to this is in most cases when people do see an apparition, they usually report that they're missing their legs or their feet. So if we go back to the experiment we just did, how many in this room actually saw their complete self? Raise your hand. Maybe a couple people. But in most cases, we don't see our complete self. We think of ourselves from our torso on up. So this, again, could support that theory that how you see yourself is how you project yourself as a ghost. Now, in the scientific study, back in the 19th century, the paranormal research had begun. And again, it was following that big spiritual movement. Now, Edison was very much into the paranormal. In fact, he was working on a ghost communication machine. But unfortunately, he died before he ever completed his work. So no one knows exactly where he was going with this. But then Albert Einstein, he taught us that energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can be converted or transformed from one state to another. Well, that's true. Ghosts are energy. We ourselves are energy. So what happens to that energy when we pass on? That's something we're still exploring. In fact, there was an experiment done called the weight of the soul. And this is where a doctor took 5 patients on the verge of death. And he weighed them right before they died and right after they died. Now he found that with 2 of these patients, there was a weight change of exactly 1.5 ounces. Now, unfortunately, the other 3, their weight went up and down. So it's really hard to prove, does the soul weigh 1.5 ounces? I think a little more research would need to go into that. But it was definitely an interesting experiment. Then orophotography came around, also known as crystalline photography. And this was actually believed to be proof of the soul. Yeah. And this is a special camera that would actually take a picture of the subject, and in this photo, this light would appear around you. And this light could be in different colors and different extremes depending on the subject. Yeah. So they did this experiment, and they found that it only worked with living things. And they did the torn leaf experiment. And this is where they took a picture of a leaf. And you can see the light still around that leaf. Then they took that leaf and they ripped off the leafy part. And they took a picture of just the twig. And to their surprise, still the whole leaf showed. Showing that energy still remains. In fact, they've done this with folks who have lost limbs. And that energy will still be there. In fact, this could explain the phenomenon when somebody does lose a limb, they have what they call the phantom itching or the phantom pains. Yeah. Now, some people believe that this could be our psychic energy as well. Now, perception. This plays a big part in this field. In fact, this is what inspired me to write the book Psychology for the Ghost Hunter. Now, one of the things that I've learned is if you take a believer in ghosts and a skeptic, and you put them in the same kind of room, and they have the exact same experience, do we believe that both of the reports are going to be exactly the same? No. Because this is all based off of perception as well. And so I started doing a lot of research into this, and I started finding out all kinds of interesting phenomena. In fact, there's a lot of cases out there where you'll have those same 2 people in the room, and one person will see a ghost in the room, and the other person won't see it. And I thought, well, maybe it has to do with the left side or the right side of the brain as well. Maybe that person is just picking up that information from a different side of the brain. And there's a lot of research going into this. So as we look at this picture of a woman spinning here, how many of you see her spinning to the left? Raise your hand. How many of you see her spinning to the right?
Oh, it just switched.
Okay.
It just
This is nothing more than just an optical illusion. They believe that whatever side of the brain is receiving the image depicts on what side she's going to be traced. Yeah. And if you don't believe me, you can actually change her. I find if you blink really, really fast, you can actually make it go the other way. If you haven't been able to use her. Yeah.
Yeah, it switched for 1 second.
I've got 3 switches.
Did you? Alright, so psychic elements. Psychic study started back in the late 1920s. And you started to find that there were more psychic women than men. And you also found that it's 1 out of 3 people have actually had some sort of psychic experience in their life. In fact, it's very common that you might think about a person that you hadn't talked about or thought about maybe in years. And while you're thinking about that person, all of a sudden you'll get a text message from them, or a phone call, or even an email from them. That could be considered psychic. Yeah. Everybody has a possibility. I think we've all gotten lazy through technology that we're not willing to intrude ourselves into. Now, I do use psychics on investigations when available, but I don't depend on a psychic. I use them as another tool to help us to decipher what could be happening in some of these properties. Now, a lot of people didn't know this, but Abraham Lincoln was considered to be a psychic. Yeah. He actually had a dream that foretold his own assassination just weeks before it actually happened. He's also known to be haunting quite a few places, one of those being the White House. So we're going to do a psychic test. Now, normally I test a guy out on this because we all know you ladies have that gift every once in a while. But since I'm the only guy in the room, do I have a female volunteer? All right. So I'm going to show you 5 symbols. You have the plus, the wavy lines, the square, the star, and the circle. All right. I want you to guess from left to right what symbol's going to be over that card.
I'm going to be bad at this.
You might be surprised. What's your first guess?
Squiggle.
You going for the wavy lines or what some people like to call the bacon? No? Next.
You're gonna say plus? I was gonna say circle.
Circle. Yeah.
I thought star and then I changed my mind.
Sometimes go with your first image. You know,
right?
it's usually the right.
What's that?
Your chances go up each time.
Unless they repeat it in their secrecy.
Oh, yeah.
What's the next one?
Circle. I thought that was.
Sometimes don't try too hard, you know?
Bacon.
Close. This joke is better when a guy does it, okay?
Wavy like bacon.
Alright, so
Yeah.
how many got one? How many got two? Three? If you got all four, I'd be really impressed. So this takes us into what we fear, poltergeists. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions when the word poltergeist is used. People tend to think that if there's any physical disturbances, it must be a poltergeist. That is not true. Ghosts can cause physical disturbances as well. The true meaning behind a poltergeist phenomena is it's a non-human haunting. So no apparitions are ever seen. It is believed to be non-channeled telekinetic energy coming from a living person. And this is referred to as an agent. So we're finding that children going through puberty, stressful conditions, and now they're finding women going through menopause can actually stir up poltergeist phenomena.
Oh my gosh, I so knew that was
Well, this is what you
everything.
this is what you get to look forward to. Yes, they tend to be more malevolent or playful, known for throwing objects, starting fires, leaving scratches or bite marks, slapping a person. Wouldn't that be a great talent to have? Huh? Lifting or tossing a person. Now, it's very sudden activity, very short-lived. Only physical disturbances are reported, and they are extremely rare. All right. Another thing that people fear, possession. Yes. That's spirit attachment. It is believed that a spirit can attach itself shortly to a living person shortly after death. And some of the things that you'll experience is a change of behavior, unexplainable exhaustion, changes in entire speech and moods. I know a lot of people say this could also be PMS as well. But I thought this was interesting. In India, women are most likely to be possessed when experiencing menstrual pain, miscarriages, death of a child, abuse by a husband, or infidelity. And the way to exorcise the evil spirits is to offer her copper coins, burn cow dung, blow it in her face, beat her, pull her hair, and if that doesn't work, oh, here's some gifts and candy.
Yeah,
I think so,
exactly.
too. Now, people may be aware of this case. It actually was a movie called The Haunting of Emily Rose. But it is actually based off a true case back in the 1970s when Emily Rose was believed to be possessed. And the church was very much involved, and these are actually photos from that case. And I actually have the audio clip as well. Now the reason why, I should point out, the reason why this case got to be so well known is because she died right after the exorcism. And a lot of people believe that she died because of the exorcism. I'll tell you why she died after this. So listen carefully to this video or audio clip. Now, the reason why she died was a simple fact that the church failed to take care of her daily needs, food and water. She actually died from starvation and dehydration. Yeah. In fact, the priests involved in that case actually went to prison. Yeah. Now, St. Louis University, that actually is important to me because that's where a very important possession case took place, and I actually got to investigate it. Yeah, that's where the true exorcist case took place. Now, the story is actually about a little boy named Robbie and a little girl named Linda Blair. Okay, and he was actually brought to university, because of his possession. The church actually on the property was the one that was actually involved. And this was back in 1949, and he actually stayed in this building. Now this white part right here, that's actually the church. Now they believed that they could not perform a full exorcism on the boy in the church because this could possibly kill him. So they moved him to various secret locations. So one of the locations was this building that he actually stayed in for a short time. And he slept on the 4th floor. Well, I got to investigate the 4th floor. Now, as I said, I lecture all over at colleges, universities, and when I do my lecture, I'll take the students on a ghost hunt to their campus. So they actually took me to this building and took me to the 4th floor. Now, I was kind of shocked when I got to the 4th floor because the rest of the floors were, nice. But when you get to the 4th floor, it's completely abandoned. Run down, graffiti everywhere, holes all over the place. All the doors were gone. And the reason for this is because they, the fact that there's so much vandalism up there because students like to go up there and scare each other. So security had removed all the doors because they've had problems with students constantly sneaking up there. So it just made it easier for them to do the rounds. So I'm kind of going around through all these different rooms and stuff, and they're telling me the history, like when the nuns used to live on the 4th floor, and they used to teach Sunday school up there, and you could see all the old classrooms. And we start making our way around, and somehow this is a room where a nun had committed suicide, and I'm thinking that's great. Not that she did that, but it was just a good lead. But we go through these different rooms, and I finally walk in this one room, and right when I walk in the room, I hear this crunch underneath my feet. And I looked down and I realized I'd stepped on a dead bird. It happens, you get into some of these abandoned places, animals get trapped and they die. So for me, it was nothing unusual. I just kind of kicked it over the side so no one else would step on it. But to my surprise, the room was just filled with dozens and dozens of dead birds. Yeah. In fact, this is the hallway that goes down into that room at the end of the hall. And that is that room. Okay? Now, if you've never seen a dead bird, and I'll show you some of them here. There they are. Yeah. And here's a close-up. Okay. Now, again, no doors. And I've already been through most of the 4th floor. This is the first time I come across any dead animals. And I mean, you think, I was like, wow, these birds had access to the whole 4th floor. Why did they all choose to die in this one room? Come to find out, this is the room that the boy had stayed in. Now, the story is that they performed multiple exorcisms on this boy, moving him to various different locations. So I realized I'm standing in this room filled with all these dead birds, knowing that an exorcism had been performed in this room. Creep factor's just gone up. Yeah. Now, I've been in some of the deepest, darkest places you could imagine, and I'm hardly ever fazed by this. But I'm a little creeped out, I'll admit it. But I also, got the students with me, so I gotta, butch it up, yeah, I can handle this. So I give the students some of the basic equipment to use. And they're basically, walking around this room, and we're in the room for less than 5 minutes, when all of a sudden, all the equipment starts to go off at the exact same time. The temperature starts to drop in the room. And you can feel the room getting colder and colder. And I'm expecting to see my breath anytime soon. The EMF detector's going off like crazy. And we can't figure out what's causing the EMF readings. There's no power going on with that. And of course, the compass is spinning around and around and around and around, and it will not stop. So I gotta document this. I gotta prove to you guys that we're really experiencing this. But a picture is not going to prove that. So luckily, I had my camera do video, and it switched it over to infrared video, so I can film in the dark. So I start filming everything that's going on. I'm filming the equipment, I'm filming the students, and then it starts to slow down a little bit. So I realized, okay, before it completely stops, I want to try for EVP. Now, if you're not familiar with EVP is what we call electronic voice phenomena. Those are those voices that appear on the recorders that are not supposed to be there. So I start asking questions into the air. And I asked the question, can you tell me whose room this is? There's about 12 seconds of silence. Then all of a sudden I start to hear crying to the left of me. And I turn and I realize that a couple of the female students have started to cry because they're so terrified being in this room. And don't worry, ladies, I've had guys cry too, all right? So I realized, okay, they're uncomfortable. I have to admit, I'm a little uncomfortable too. So for me, it's always safety first. So I decided to wrap it up, and I said, well, you know, I'll come back later on my own. Well, little did I know I wasn't going to have the chance to go back that night. But when I finally finished my lecture tour, and I got home and started reviewing all my evidence from all the campuses that I've been to, I got to that video. And I got to the part in the video where I'd asked, can you tell me whose room this is? I got 2 responses. And guess what? I'm going to play that video for you. So listen carefully. In this video, I'd asked, can you tell me whose room this is? And I'm going to edit this because I don't want to offend any of you. But it says, F you, it's mine. So, and I'll point up when it actually plays, so listen carefully. Hopefully it'll play loud enough for the TV. Can you tell me whose room this is? We'd just like to get some sort of sign that you're here. That's the crying. You guys okay? Yeah. Is the compass still going off? Yeah. It hasn't found north yet? Okay. So did you hear that in the beginning?
Yeah.
It is a whisper. EVPs are very light in the background. So I'll play it one more time. Let me see if I can get a little more volume out of this too. Alright. And again, I'll point out when it plays. Can you tell me whose room this is? We'd just like to get some sort of sign that you're here. Yeah. Now I'm making contact. EVP, electronic voice phenomena. This actually came about in 1959 by Frederick Jurgensen. He actually happened to be in the woods with a portable reel-to-reel recorder trying to capture bird calls. But to his surprise, when he played back his recordings, he actually captured the voice of his dead aunt talking to him. Yeah. Now, it actually became very popular in the 1970s here in the US. And I'm going to play you guys a couple examples of some of the EVPs my team has actually captured. Now, I try not to tell you right away what it says, because then it becomes suggestive. So some of them, if it's hard to hear, especially when we're dealing with low audio, I'll tell you. But this one, let's see if you guys can actually make it out real quick, and they'll tell you the story.
I don't think I've ever wore these things longer than 5 hours. Now that
All right, so in this one, you heard the investigator say, I normally don't wear these for longer than 5 hours. We're actually spending the night doing an investigation on the USS Turner Joy in Bremerton, Washington. It's a retired Navy destroyer. And one of the things that we decided to do is what we call a trigger, is we dressed up in Navy uniforms. Now, I was able to obtain the old blues that they would have worn on the ship when it was still active. Now, he actually was in his whites because he's actually in the Navy. And he's telling me that he normally doesn't have to wear his uniform for more than 5 hours. Now, it's just me and him in this room. And we're in an old refrigeration area where there has been reported activity, and we're right in the middle of changing our tapes. That's why we're there. And little did we know, what you'll hear in the background, it sounds like a fight. And then somebody yells, butt kicking. All right, so I'll play it one more time.
I don't think I've ever wore these things longer than 5 hours. Now that
Yeah. Now, what makes this even EVP pretty interesting is I had submitted all the evidence that we collected to the director. And he actually sat on this for quite a few years. When out of the blue, he gives me a call. He says, you know what, funniest thing just happened. Now, every so often, men that actually served on the ship will come back and visit. And so whenever these guys come back, they love to hear their stories. So they encourage these old timers to, please, give us a tour of the ship and tell us your stories, what it was like, serving on the ship. So this guy is taking the director around on the ship, into all these different places, and he takes him down to the refrigeration area where we capture that EVP. He says, oh, I've got a great story to tell you. He said that when he was serving, at the time there was this big cook and this little cook. And that big guy constantly kept picking on that little guy. And one day when those two were down there, that big guy started picking on that little guy, and that little guy just had it. He snapped, and he went after that big guy. And that guy said that was the biggest butt kicking I'd ever seen. Now, what's really odd about that is that he used the word butt kicking. Sailors have the dirtiest mouths, Why would he? Why not ass kicking or anything like that? But yeah, he used butt kicking, and right when he said butt kicking, that triggered the EVP that we captured previously. And so we think we captured that residual energy of that fight that actually took place in that room. Yeah. Now, Ripley's, believe it or not, I actually got to investigate this place in Ocean City. And I was doing an investigation for the Society of the Supernatural. And to my surprise, I captured this dark, shadowy image with the thermal camera, standing right there. Yeah. Now, another great story to share with you. Actually, I can let June share this story because she actually captured this piece of evidence.
Well, actually, this is at the Walker Ames house in Port Gamble, Washington. I don't know if anybody's ever been there. One of my favorite places. And this was in the Walker Ames house. And this happened probably about 1 o'clock in the morning. That's not a picture of 1 o'clock in the morning, but that's just kind of showing what the hallway looks like. I was sitting in the kind of
Oh, here, she was sitting out here.
Yeah, I was trying to think what that area is called, kind of the parlor or something like that. I was sitting there, and even though we're not supposed to be by ourselves, I was just kind of sitting there because people were in the basement and people were upstairs in the attic. So I was sitting in the middle, just being really quiet and seeing if I could hear anything. And all of a sudden I heard shuffling over there, and I thought it was people from downstairs coming upstairs. So I aimed the thermal imaging camera and I took a couple shots just really quick.
That's the first one.
And all of a sudden, it's like I thought, what is that? I'm getting this weird image, and this is the hallway.
So
right there.
In this hallway right here, and you can see that's the walls right there. So in the middle of that hallway, there's this what looks like a figure with its back arched and its arm back. Like it's missing the head, like if it had the head right there. Yeah. So she immediately takes another picture after seeing that, and it's gone. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Now, another interesting thing that was captured there around that same area, in this audio clip, you'll hear the investigators, they hear what sounds like a woman crying. And you hear it right in the very beginning, so listen carefully right away, and they react to it. All right?
Did you hear that?
Step downstairs.
No.
I did. I gotta go back. Yeah.
Someone's almost crying.
You guys heard that, right?
Yeah, that's very clear.
All right. Now here's where it gets interesting. Now, how many of you actually watch the ghost hunting shows? Few of you? Have you ever noticed that whenever they go to a foreign country and they don't even speak English in that country, they capture EVPs in English? Isn't that kind of odd? I always thought so too. Well, I can verify the fact that I travel all over the world with my team, and we do capture EVPs in other languages. In fact, this video clip that I'm going to play for you guys was video recorded in the catacombs. Now they put me in the catacombs in a small section, they locked me in the section. Because the problem is the catacombs are so huge that people have been known to get lost for days down there. So they wanted to make sure I didn't wander off too far. So they locked me in this little section. Now, I will admit, I don't speak Italian. But I'm trying to do the best that I can to communicate in another country, hoping that somebody might be able to understand me. And to my surprise, somebody did. And so listen carefully, and again, I'll point up when it actually plays. Anybody here? We'll repeat. Anybody here?
Yeah,
Which is yes in Italian.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Now this takes me into one of my favorite subjects. Yes, possessed objects. Yes, everybody's probably familiar with this doll, Annabelle. It's actually been launched in now 3 movies. But a lot of people are unaware that the true Annabelle doll is actually a Raggedy Ann doll. Yeah. And in fact, just The Conjuring in the very beginning of the movie is the only thing that's loosely based off of this doll. The rest is all made up, all right? Just so you know, okay? But of course, this is also a prime example of when Hollywood gets a hold of a good story, they gotta make it scarier than it actually was. So people believe that this Raggedy Ann doll was not scary enough, so they had to create this doll. But I'm sure half of you would probably think this is scary enough, right? Now, I actually have quite a few haunted objects in my museum, but one of the favorite stories I like to tell is this guy's story, Mr. Creepy. Yeah. It's not a name I gave him, it's a name he actually came with. Now his story is he was actually created in the early 1960s by a retired ventriloquist artist. And in his retirement years, he would create these dolls and perform from time to time. Well, he actually made this doll. And he actually made a female counterpart. Interesting enough, it was actually made in his likeness and in his wife's likeness. And what makes these dolls even more creepier is they use their real hair on these dolls. Yeah. So, this woman actually had purchased the dolls as a pair after the couple had passed away. And she put them on display on a shelf behind the register. And they sat there for a good long time, no issues whatsoever, until unfortunately they sold her building. So she actually had to pack up everything in her shop, and she puts it into storage. Now she packed up the dolls separately. Now when she gets her new location, she has to restock it, so she goes back to that storage unit, starts pulling pieces out, and she comes across him. But she didn't find the female counterpart. So she went ahead and took him, and she put him in a glass case behind the register. And right away, she kept getting this eerie feeling, like there was somebody standing behind her, breathing down the back of her neck. Yeah. She would just get the chills, that icy feeling. In fact, some days she would come in and find that his head would be turned in another direction. His eyes would be looking in another direction. Now what's really odd about that is his eyes are actually spring-loaded. So the trigger, when you push the trigger to make his eyes go left or right, once you let go of the trigger, his eyes spring right back to the center. So they cannot stay left or right unless your finger's on the trigger. I've tested this. I've experienced this. I'll come in and find that his eyes will be looking in another direction. Right when you open the case to go to touch them, they spring right back to the center. Yeah. Any slight movement will do that. So she's experiencing this. She said even one day she came in and found the glass case wide open. It freaked her out enough that she ended up moving him to the back of the store on the bottom shelf. She didn't have to deal with them on a daily basis. Well, I come in, and I'm looking for, pieces for my museum, and I always ask them, do you have anything that's odd? And I let them determine what they think is odd, because I like to hear their stories. And immediately she introduces me to him. So I love this guy. I'm going to give him a good home at Spooked in Seattle. So I took him to Spooked in Seattle, and I put him in this big glass antique cabinet. Now it's one of those big heavy cabinets that the only access to it is behind. So I actually had to pull the cabinet away from the wall, unlock the doors, slide them open, put them in there, slide the doors, lock it, push it back up against the wall. A couple days go by, and I'm alone in the office. And I actually heard this thud against glass. Immediately thought something happened in the gift shop. So I go out, I'm looking around, and I can't find anything disturbed. But I still can't figure out what caused that noise. So I start making my way around. And I started coming around the glass case, and I'm now facing that glass case, and I notice that his head is turned and up against the glass. So being the ghost hunter I am, I quickly, take a picture of it. This is where it gets even more interesting. This is the photo that I took. What's interesting is the reflection. Where you see that this doll has these very cartoonish features, big round cheeks, round eyes, and on the reflection, he actually has very droopy eyes, more elongated face, more lifelike. I think that is the man that actually haunts this doll. Now a lot of people ask me why. I think it's because he's actually looking for the female counterpart. They've never been separated since the day they were created. So it is my quest to try and find her, because I would love to bring those two together and maybe even bring him to peace. Now another fun story, sorry, I'll go back, is at our museum we also have a doll. Now the doll is not haunted, it actually is tied to a little girl, the ghost of a little girl that haunts our museum. And I know of her because we actually got to investigate this place when it was still a restaurant before we had taken over the spot. Now there was a child's wooden chair that I came across, and when I moved into this place I decided I was going to keep this chair and not throw it away with all the other trash that they left behind. And as soon as I started playing around with this chair, the chair started moving around by itself. So I figured, okay, this has got to be the little girl. Maybe she's letting us know that she's still around. So I actually purchased a doll for her. Now this doll actually has a little wind-up mechanism in her back, so if you wind her up, her head will spin around. I'm kidding. She actually has a music box inside of her. Now, there have been times when I will be alone closing down Spook in Seattle, and as I'm heading up the staircase, I'm going past the window of the museum where she's at, this little doll. And I actually will hear the music box playing by itself. Yeah. Now, I should actually tell you that when we experience odd things, I am one of those ghost hunters that runs towards it, not away. So if you're trying to get away from it, don't follow me, all right? So I immediately run down the stairs, I get to the doll, and nothing. And that's actually happened a couple times to me. In fact, June has actually experienced it a couple times herself.
I have.
Yeah. Now, we actually had an investigation team go in and investigate, and they captured something pretty amazing. In this video I'm going to play for you guys, you're going to hear a gentleman say, "Did you get your balls?" Get it out of your system. Actually, what it's referring to are the ping pong balls. They're so light that they're actually known to move around by themselves. So that's really what it's referring to. But right after that, you're going to hear the doll. And the team gets excited. Like, oh my God, the doll, you guys can hear the doll. And the team lead's trying to get his team to quiet down so that they can record the doll. So he says hush out loud to his team to shut him up. But right when he says hush, the doll stops too. So watch this.
Did you guys get your balls? Oh, hey. Did you hear that? Touch.
Now, there are two types of hauntings. One is an actual haunting. And this is evidence that there is something intelligent there. These will react to you, they will attempt to make contact, react to their environment, answer questions on EVP, and follow instructions, and apparitions will actually look at you, not through you. Then, of course, there is residual haunting. This is about 80% of most hauntings is residual energy. And this is energy left behind from the dead and also the living. Yes. It's non-intelligent, and it's just like broken movie reels are memories trapped. And they just keep playing that same event over and over and over again. So when you get into residual energy, such as negative energy, this produces high levels of emotional energy. So situations like murder, fighting, suicide, we find that somehow these get recorded into the environment. We don't know how yet, but it does happen. So example of this is, let's say a married couple moves into a house. Now they fight so much that they divorce and move away. Now another couple can move into this house. And if they're sensitive enough, they can actually pick up on the energy from the previous couple. And they will start to fight with each other. They don't know why, but they do. Same thing with a suicide. You can move into a room where somebody had committed suicide. And if you're sensitive enough, you can actually pick up on that depression. And you may even become depressed yourself, almost to the point where you may even attempt suicide. In fact, I've been working with a campus that had to shut down a dorm room and turn it into storage because on 2 separate occasions, 2 students have actually committed suicide in that room. Yeah. Now, this is another interesting phenomena that we have experienced. And in this video, one of our team members had something that she believed followed her from one of the investigations that we had done. And so every time she started doing EVPs with us during investigations, she kept getting this interesting response. So we decided to do an experiment where we had her hold a recorder, open palm. There was a camera on the recorder the whole time so we could see that she wasn't tampering with it. And we wanted to see what she would get out of this EVP session. I will play you what we captured.
Hi, it's me again. Obviously. No one can understand why you have to scream, and neither can I. Why do you follow me everywhere? I know you need my help, but I can't understand you. Please, can you just try to not scream? Can you try to tell me your name? Or what you'd like for us to call you? I have friends with me. They understand things in the spirit world. We all want to try to help. I know you came with me from Rolling Hills, and I told you you would never have to go back there. But now I'm thinking you need to go someplace else. I'm going to turn off my recorder. Hopefully I can hear you. I know it's frustrating for you, and it is for me too. I'm going to turn it off now. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah. Again, just some of the interesting things that we do experience in this field. Now, explanation for it all. There is none. This is all based off of theories and ideas. We don't have all the answers. As I've always said, there's always going to be more questions than the answers when you enter this field. Now, we do believe that they can adjust to their environments. And when you get into witnessing activity, you have to understand that when you're dealing with something intelligent, you're dealing with something that has free will. It doesn't have to communicate to you if it doesn't want to. Then you always have a "you've just missed it" phenomenon. You don't know how many times we're right in the middle of changing our tapes or changing our batteries or memory cards, and things tend to happen, and we tend to miss it. Yeah. Then there's shock. Some of the best investigators will go into shock when they have these experiences and forget to collect the data needed to support that experience. And what does skeptics say? Well, it's all hallucinations. What drugs have we been taking? Obviously the good ones, right? Now, where do you find ghosts? Everywhere. Just because a place is old and run down does not necessarily mean it's going to be haunted. In fact, it's 1 out of 10 cases that's going to provide some sort of answer that there could be something paranormal going on. So you have to understand with ghost hunting, it's all about being at the right place at the right time. Now I'm going to share one last case with you guys. This is a case that actually got national attention. In fact, this was even talked about on the Jay Leno show. Yeah. And I'll play the video for you real quick, and then I'll go into the story behind it. All right?
All right, this is definitely the weirdest crime blotter story we've ever seen. 2 Federal Way women claim they've been sexually attacked. Are you ready for this? By ghosts. Como 4's Elisa Jaffe went to see if it's a crime or a crock.
In the Federal Way Mirror, yep, you read it right, 2 women report ghosts having sex with them. According to this police report, the women came here to the Federal Way police station and told officers that a paranormal person has been placing sensors on their bodies and having intercourse with them. Police declined comment on the report. An odd case for cops and reporters.
I believe there's something out there.
But it's right up Ross Allison's alley. He's a ghost hunter. We met him at the apartment where the women say a spirit has haunted them for 2 years.
Cases like that don't pop up that often.
Well, if you look, his other leg appears to still be there and not move, while these others do.
With the Sci-Fi Channel hit Ghost Hunters, paranormal popularity is soaring. And Allison says as the number of ghost shows grows, so do spirit sightings.
And so they start to label every little interesting thing happening in their home as paranormal activity.
Which might be
Just the house creaking. Yeah.
candid questions help ghost hunters sort the eerie from the unstable.
A lot of times you'll find that it could be medications that they're taking or something that's psychological.
The maintenance man in charge of all these units told me the women keep calling him saying the ghosts are raping them on weekend nights. He told them to call police. Police tell me they don't have any investigative leads. Ross Allison says he'd need a psychic to check. And the women, well, they weren't anywhere to be found. Just like the ghost. In Federal Way, Elisa Jaffe, Como 4 News.
Yeah, interesting case. Now, the media contacted me because they wanted to find out, is it possible? Well, I said, yeah, there's a very famous case in the 70s known as the Entity case. In fact, it led to a movie with Barbara Hershey where a woman was physically attacked by a ghost. So they wanted to know, is it possible, and if I meet with these women. And so, of course, I showed up, and the women weren't there to be found. Well, this got to be well known. This case was all over, this news clip started going all over the place. And so, once it got a lot of attention, of course, those ladies finally contacted me, wanted to know if we'd be willing to do an investigation. So I said, sure. So, let me walk you through the investigation. Now, one of the things that we do is a walkthrough, which is our pre-investigation. This is to examine the environment that we're going into. This is also to examine and learn about the clients that you're going to be working with. You want to interview them and get as much details as possible. And this is all just to determine whether it's even worth your time and energy. Well, one of the things I noticed is I lived in an apartment building, and it was a very cluttered environment. But I also noticed, too, that they had these religious artifacts all over the place. Bibles were everywhere, crucifixes, little angels were all over the place. And of course, I asked them why, and they said it was to protect themselves, and I said, that's great. I always will encourage you to use whatever you need to protect yourself. Now, as I'm going around, I noticed that they had this huge Bible in the center of the hallway. Now for me, I wanted to pick it up and move it to the side so that my members don't trip over it. And as I leaned over to grab it, she yelled at me. She's like, "Don't touch that." So why is that? She said, because that's where the demon's been burning a hole through the carpet to get to us. I said, well, unfortunately, I have to see this to document this stuff. So she proceeds to lift up the Bible, and underneath the Bible is this tiny little burn mark in the carpet. Now I should point out that they are smokers, and they do smoke in their apartments. All right? So I said, okay, you can go ahead and return the Bible. So now she wants to introduce me to these, other things that she's experienced in the house. And one of the things that she takes me to is the kitchen. And she proceeds to show me this mass, this dark mass on the refrigerator. She claims that this is where the demon's been trying to burn through the refrigerator to get to the sensors that they've been storing in the freezer. I'll get to the sensors. So does anybody have an idea what this is? That's a good guess, yeah. If you're going to be cooking on this big burner, which nothing is dividing the refrigerator and the stove, obviously you're going to have some splatter. In fact, I even took my fingernails and ran it across there and pulled off some grease and grime, and I showed her, I said, I don't think anything's trying to burn through your refrigerator. But she didn't want to believe me. So I said, well, okay, show me these sensors that you find on your body when you wake up in the morning. So she proceeds to go to that freezer. She opens it up, and she pulls out a paper bag, and she sets it on the coffee table. She opens it up, pulls out a plastic bag, sets it on the coffee table. Opens that up, there's another plastic bag, sets it on the coffee table. Opens that up, another plastic bag, sets it on the table. So it goes through about 6 plastic bags when she finally starts to pull out these. All right, in fact, I have one. Okay? And we're running our EMF detectors across this, trying to see if there's any readings. And look at that. What do you think that is? Very good guess. Yes. You can see coffee grounds inside of them. To me, it's just trash. All right? Because throughout all the years that I've been in this field and all the books that I've read about the paranormal, I've never come across a case where apparently ghosts have been placing sensors on people's bodies. Let alone what are they sensing, all right? But yeah, so I know it's fascinating, but I'm examining this, and I'm looking at it closely, and I'm like, where did you find this? And she proceeds to tell me that she found this in her vagina. The problem is, I did. And don't worry, I made this one. All right? But yeah, I try to remain professional at that moment, So it clearly became a case of don't call us, we'll call you. All right? So I'm going to give you guys a quick photo quiz. Now these are photos appearing all over the internet as proof to the paranormal. And I want to see if you guys can help me debunk these. Like this one. Oh, no problem. No problem.
I'm going to leave some cash with the waitress.
So, in this photo, you're going to see what looks like a demon-like figure in an actual cemetery. All right? That's the actual photo. Anybody have an idea what that is?
Yeah, what is that red thing there?
It's the pinwheel, the little flower pinwheel. It's the shadow of that pinwheel showing up on that. Yeah, not a demon. How about this one where they claim to have captured this ghost in someone's room? It's a poster on the wall. You too can have this ghost in your room. But it only makes me question the ghost hunter that's taking pictures through people's bedroom windows.
Right?
Yeah. How about this one, where they claim to have captured this ghost-like figure outside of the car door? Now, it might help if you actually look at the complete photo.
Oh, is it a reflection?
Reflection. Yes. Was the flash used? That's a big question to ask.
Yeah.
And you can tell because the whites are much brighter. So flash was used. Well, simple science. When light is greater on one side of glass than the other, what does it do? It reflects. So what they actually captured is the knee of the baby, and there's his little foot. So it's actually the baby's in those little footy pajamas.
Yeah.
You see it now?
Yeah.
And keep that baby's knee away from me. How about this one? I love this one because it actually had a great story with it, where a student visits a campus and he has his photo taken and he dies the next day. And when they developed the picture, all of a sudden there was this ghost standing right next to him. Yeah. In fact, this ghost had become very popular because I start to find her in other photos as well. There she is again. I'm guessing she made a career out of this because this is where I find her. So in examining the proof, if you're going to become a ghost hunter or fascinated with this field, educate yourself. Because as you start to educate yourself, you'll be able to determine as to what's real and what's fake. Then, of course, always ask yourself, why was this photo taken in the first place? That's always your first clue. And no matter what, some may not want to believe in the simplest explanation, as others may never believe in the possibility alone. Thank you guys, and I hope you enjoy your presentation.
So did the woman who had the screamer following her around, did that be used for case numbers on it? Or?
Yes. And it actually became a situation where it was a lot of communication with whatever was following her. Telling it to move on, sorry, we can't understand what you're trying to say. Because the sad thing is, people want to automatically default to demon. Because you hear something screaming at you, you're going to take it as a negative, right? But what if that's the only way it can communicate? But it's trying to communicate to you, but it only knows how to scream. It hasn't learned how to talk to you. So we decided just to approach it in a very positive way and just try to communicate to it and try to help it understand the situation. And after a while, it just stopped.
That one always gives me goosebumps.
Well, and the part that it sounds almost like at the beginning there that there's a lot of, before the person started screaming, was that there was a static feeling.
Right.
And I've come across those a couple of times, and it's awful. It just makes your skin crawl. One of them was projected by a person who I ran into at a donut shop. I wanted to make copies. Well, she did not want anybody making too much noise, things like that. Now that I'm older, I realize she had some issues going on. But I was 16 and stupid, and I did not back down from wanting to get my copies. And she came up behind me, and it felt like she was putting off this static field. That's what it, she was so not healthy. It was just, yeah, I'll never forget that. So it was like if I came across somebody like that again, it's like I put a lot of space between me and them, because you just don't know what they're gonna do. But yeah,
Any other questions? Yes.
I'm kind of curious about the technology that you use.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, one of the things I have to clarify is there's no such thing as a ghost meter. Right? As I talked about in the presentation, you have to know what a ghost is made of to actually develop a tool to detect that. We don't know what they're made of. The best that we can do as paranormal investigators is collect as many devices that help us to read the environment to let us know if there's changes in the environment that can't be explained. So more commonly, we'll use EMF detectors, we'll use ion counters, we'll use thermal and temperature readings. And of course, audio is very important. Visual is very important. So you do a lot of infrared video, especially in the dark. So there's all kinds of different things, and I'm all about bringing new technology into it to help one device help read another device. Because you can't just use one device to prove that there's something paranormal going on. It's going to be a combination of different readings that's going to support that encounter. So again, the list can go on and on. My team has spent well over $40,000 in equipment. We have a device called Spectre, which stands for.
Just stop it. I'm recording.
Stands for Special Paranormal Energy Computer Tracking Research Equipment. She can never get that one right.
I don't know why. I have a block.
But anyways, that is a computer setup that has a bunch of different sensors connected to it. Excuse me. And those sensors will read different things. And it'll produce a graph and let us know if anything changes in the environment. So that's how advanced we are. We have 3 thermal cameras, all kinds of fun stuff. Yes?
So I have a question about the psychics. So if you're going someplace, could you talk about the different abilities and like if it's supposedly demonic, whatever, people that specialize in that or people that are like, I'm out, I don't do that or whatever?
Well, it's a lot there.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. I do use psychics every so often when they are available to us. Like I said, I don't depend on a psychic.
Yeah.
It's just another tool to help you understand what could be happening in the environment, because obviously an EMF detector is not going to give you a name or give you a date. So it is nice to have somebody that could be more sensitive or even psychic. One of the things though that I'm really strict about is I believe, as I said, everybody has the possibility. There's a lot of people that want to believe that they're psychic when they're not, right? Because they run more into their overactive imaginations, or there's even those who just want the attention. But the fact of the matter is, if you're going to be a psychic, you kind of have to prove it to me. And so I have strict rules for anybody that comes into my group as possibly psychic or sensitive. I don't let them know any prior information about the location. They have to go in absolutely cold. In fact, my whole team goes in cold. They don't know, any information about the site. The only information they know when they sign up for an investigation is it a business or a home, and what city it takes place in. That is it. Because you don't want people to prejudge an investigation. And if you are working with something that could be psychic or sensitive, you don't want to ruin it for them. Because I'm all about building their credibility as well. Because you might not think you're a psychic or sensitive at all. In fact, we've learned by the way that we investigate, it really builds the confidence when my team can go in and document phenomena that they've written down, and then when they share their notes, they find out that, oh wow, 3 of us on the team felt the exact same thing. They didn't share it with each other, but they all wrote it down. And it just makes it more credible when they are able to share those experiences. So, when it comes to psychics, it's really hard, to determine what is the best psychic to use, because there are different abilities. Clairaudient, clairsentient. So everybody has different levels of feeling. But the best is going to be more of a medium type, that person that is a little more sensitive. And that could be somebody who, when you walk into a room and you're alone in the room, but you feel like you're not alone in the room. Somebody like that would be perfect for an investigation when they're sensitive to the energy in the room. But being a psychic or sensitive can also be misleading as well, because when you get those feelings, it may not be an entity of itself. It could be just an experience that happened in the room. And so you can easily confuse those emotions or those feelings and not be able to determine whether it's an actual ghost or just you're picking up on a past event. So when you get into the metaphysical element, it can become very grayish, So I really focus on trying to keep my team in the middle. You know, yeah, we'll dabble a little bit in the psychic element, but we also want to bring the technical aspect into it and just kind of head down the middle of the road.
When you
So-
talk about memories, because this is the first time I've heard of that, as opposed to it being an actual ghost. It kind of makes me think of space-time, like a time warp. Like
Yeah. And
that,
there's
like
theories-
that is occurring right
Right.
now,
And
but
there's,
somewhere else within a different dimension or
Right.
something. At the same time, we're there, that you're
Right.
capturing it from the subject.
and that is one of the theories behind a lot of this. Some people think that there very well could be time slips.
Yeah.
That when you have an experience and see somebody dressed in old time clothes, that you're experiencing something that happened in the past. There's that time loop that somehow you crossed over and you're witnessing that at the time. Again, just another theory.
Yeah.
And it's very possible, but we're finding that there is a lot of this energy that we displace that does carry on. In fact, a lot of situations where you'll be in a house and you'll hear somebody walking up and down the halls. Well, we constantly travel up and down the halls daily, and somehow that can easily be recorded into the environment. You know, maybe you were having a very stressful day and you're pacing up and down the hall trying to figure out what the hell am I going to do about this situation. And as you're pacing, somehow that's getting recorded into the environment, all that emotion you're putting out. And so that could explain a lot of times when people hear that walking up and down the halls. In fact, here's a great example of this. There was a couple that moved into this house, and every morning around 6 o'clock in the morning, they would smell cookies baking in the kitchen. Yeah. And it was like clockwork. Every morning that would happen. And they couldn't explain it. Well, come to find out, the previous owner was an elderly woman that passed away, and every morning she would bake cookies for the homeless people at the shelter down the street. So that repetitiveness that she did throughout life somehow got, recorded into the environment and continued to happen even after death. So that's what I'm saying. Even you could leave energy from behind from a place that you previously lived in. And so somebody moves in right after you and they're experiencing maybe a very traumatic moment in your life that you recorded in that environment. We don't know how it happens, but it can happen. Especially if you're kind of a person of habit. You do the same thing every day. That's one of those elements that adds to it. All right, got two people at the same time. Let me get that one.
Well, so, I mean, does it have to be, like, not have to be, but, like, scary energy? Like, you said you had a bad day, and, I mean, what if it's, like...
You gotta understand that we are taught to be afraid of this.
Yeah, I mean, that's what
Media
I was
has
saying.
taught us that if anything odd happens around us, it's gotta be scary. But it's not. In most cases, it's very rare that I come across something that's negative, that would give me the feeling like it wants me out. We're just taught that it's gotta be scary. That's what the media has done to us with all these scary movies. There's more scarier movies than there are the positive ones, like Casper the Friendly Ghost,
Well, I mean, so it could be like a warm, loving
Oh, yes.
experience, not, oh my god.
There's a lot of cases, where even, deceased loved ones will come back and, pay a visit. In fact, it's kind of odd too that when a lot of people have those experiences where the recently departed loved one had passed away, they have this common feeling overcome them. And you would think you would be afraid. You see the outline of somebody standing at the foot of your bed. You'd be terrified, right? But no, sometimes there's this overwhelming calming feeling. It's like instantly you know who it is. Oh, it's my grandfather. He just passed away. I just know it's him. Even though you cannot tell by, just the shadowy figure, but you just know. So yeah, in most cases, they're more positive than they are negative. Okay, you and then you. Okay.
So I noticed that a lot of the videos and the footage appear to be shot at night, and you mentioned sleeping overnight in places and kind of walking the catacombs different times. Do you find that there is a timing as to when these phenomena occur?
There is no time. Activity happens 24/7. We are more aware of paranormal activity at night because we're in relaxed mode. You're done with the day. kids are in bed, you're done with the chores, TV's probably turned off, you're relaxing, and now you're gonna hear the door opening and closing by itself. When that door could have been opening and closing all day, you just didn't notice it. So activity happens more, or we seem to think activity happens more at night, but it doesn't. It happens 24/7. All right. And another thing too is they'll always ask us, why do we investigate in the dark? All right. We investigate in the dark for two reasons. We have to have a control of it. All right. It's hard to do an investigation during the day when the business is up and running, customers are coming in and out, or when the family's not there. Because one of the things I've always told people is you don't want to change the environment either. So you want, when you do your initial investigation, you want whoever is experiencing the phenomena to be there for your first initial investigation before you kick everybody out. But at night tends to be the most easiest time for us to get into places, to do an investigation, when the family's home to let you in, when the business is closed for the day. Because having a controlled environment is key to an investigation. So that's why things tend to happen most at night. But I do have people journal. Journaling is so important when it comes to the paranormal. And if we find that there's a pattern to the activity and it seems to be more active at noon, I will definitely encourage us to do an investigation at noon, if that's the case. But why the dark is another question we get asked. It doesn't have to be in the dark. We use infrared video, which picks up things in the dark that a normal camera cannot pick up. So that's another reason why we would switch to dark and film in infrared. Those are the only two reasons why we tend to do things at night and in the dark. Otherwise, I would do an investigation during the day. Does that answer your question? Yeah. All right, you have one, and then I'll get to you.
So, do you have any theory about deja vu?
Well, when you get into the field of paranormal research, you kind of have to play the devil's advocate as well. You can't just say, it's one of those time slips that you experienced, or it was a psychic dream that you had, and now you're living that experience. Those are all different theories when it comes to it. There is, as I was starting to write, for my Psychology for the Ghost Hunter, there is, scientific explanation where they believe that when you're having that experience, it's actually your brain processing the experience a lot slower than normal. And that's why it feels like it's an experience you're reliving, because it's just your brain not getting through it as quickly as it normally would. So that's, again, a scientific explanation is to explain deja vu. But again, there's other theories as well.
I was like looking
All right, so yes.
So I had a question, and I don't know if this is something people ask you, but if you do go somewhere and you detect energy or whatever you're detecting, if people are wanting some type of spiritual cleansing, how does that work? Does that work?
I'll be honest with you. I would say no. For a few different reasons. If you're dealing with something residual, that's almost like yelling at your TV, telling it to go away. All right? It's not going to respond or even know what's happening. Again, residual energy is just like a trapped memory that just plays itself out over and over again. It doesn't interact with the environment. It doesn't interact with you. All right? So how do you get rid of that? Well, I think there is one way to try and get rid of it, and that is energy needs energy, all right, to continue to produce itself. So I've always suggested to people, if you believe that you're dealing with something that's residual, maybe rearrange the furniture. Maybe there is something that's producing a lot of EMF, and the theory is that EMF is feeding these elements, and that's what's triggering it and feeding it to causing it to keep looping. So that might be a way to get rid of something that could be possibly residual. Now, when it comes to something intelligent, and I've always thrown that out there, how do you use a Catholic priest to get rid of a Jewish ghost? Think about it.
He's gonna give him the finger. Like someone.
Yeah. If you really think about it, I'm not a big believer in, just saying step into the light or burn some sage and ghosts be gone. All right? I think if you are dealing with something intelligent, it's going to be more of a counseling session. Taking the time and energy to constantly communicate with whatever's in the environment and helping them to understand what's going on. Because there might be a lot of confusion. You know, everybody seen the movie The Others? Somebody hasn't, right? It's a great movie, but if you get a chance to see it, because that kind of gives you an idea of what it could be like. And I don't want to ruin it for anybody because it's an amazing movie. You do have to see it. But after seeing that movie, it makes sense to what it could be like on the other side. So, you know, that's another idea. But again, I'm not a big believer in ghost busting. We do not ghost bust. What we do is our main focus is to document what the client is experiencing, what we possibly experience, and help support the fact that there could be something going on out there. Now, if I am dealing with a client that is dealing with what they feel could be more of a dramatic experience or possibly negative, then I'll definitely step up and try to figure out more of what's going on in the environment to help them, relieve them of that situation. So I think that's the best we can do, because there are a lot of cases out there where people claim that they've had the spirits exorcised, and of course it happens again. But then play devil's advocate. It could be psychological. You tell them burn a white candle, oh, the ghosts are gone.
Well, you know, that's one thing too. We had a client not too long ago that actually paid somebody $300 to get rid of some spirits in her house. And what happened was this man came in, put some sort of concoction together that was like red Kool-Aid, something else, put it in his mouth and started spitting all over her house while burning sage. And it was kind of a red Kool-Aid thing, and it stained the walls, stained everything. And basically he told her, as long as this stays here, the ghosts will, be gone. And then she called us and said, the ghosts aren't gone. And I have Kool-Aid all over my house and spit.
Well, another very valid point here, too, is we don't charge for our investigations, because I think that also affects your credibility as well. People like to say that I'm just in it for the money. Believe me.
Yeah.
There's no money in this field.
It would be nice.
But the fact of the matter is, you don't want to charge for, cleansing services, because when you charge, people expect something in return.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot guarantee that. You cannot guarantee, I'll get rid of your ghosts, with this, burning of white sage or spitting of the Kool-Aid. It's one of those things that, again, I think it's more of a counseling session to help them to move on. Yes, and then I'll get to it.
So what do you think of, I know you do tours, like the ghost hunting tourism almost, like some friends and I went to the Port Gamble Ghost Conference, and I have a too overactive imagination to handle that. It's next month, if anyone wants. They sent me another email about it.
I'll be speaking at it.
And it's super cool, and you go into like the Walker Ames, and I noped out of the basement there.
Yeah.
And if you guys know Shelley Stevens, she has a picture of something pulling her hair. Like she took a
That's
selfie.
awesome.
She was just like, it was creepy. But so anyway, you're tromping in people into these places that have energies and residuals and stuff. Are there any ethical concerns, I guess, about that, disturbing the environment, or?
Well, for me, a lot of people have always asked, how do I do it? How do I go into some of these scariest places and not come back, harmed or in any way? I find that what has been successful for me and my team is we operate on a level of respect. We're not going to go in and taunt the spirit, say, I don't believe you, prove it, push me down the stairs, scratch me, and start cussing at the spirit. I think in that situation, if you're going to go, it's like me going into your house and start cussing you out. And you'd be like, yeah, I'll get you. Not right now. Not while the cameras are on. I'll get you later.
Right.
I think that's when you're starting to ask for trouble. So for me, I've always been very respectful, even if it's a situation like going into, the Exorcist place. I would go back, not alone, but I would go back, and again, I would continue to be respectful to whatever's there. So I think respect is the biggest part that people need to carry on when they go in and field paranormal research. Unfortunately, a lot of those groups don't do that.
Yeah, ours was great, and I don't feel it wasn't
Right.
disrespectful.
And asking permission, and also too when when you're leaving, thank you so much for letting us be here. Please stay. Don't follow me home, please.
So the, school, what was it, St. Louis School where the.
St. Louis University,
Yeah,
yes.
the birds and the boy. So is activity still happening there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
so it's.
In fact, security, the funny thing is I was invited back, actually it was a few years later. And this is because they have a rule that they can't have the same speaker back every year, so they alter these different speakers, and so I finally got the chance to go back. And it was actually about 3 or 4 years later, and to my surprise, they had actually renovated the 4th floor,
Uh-huh.
and they opened it up. And there's now offices and stuff up there, and there's a big meeting room up there and stuff.
Oh,
And I was like,
great.
oh, that's kind of cool. I wish I could have gotten in here when they were doing the renovations, because there is again more activity to be picked up. But I went to them, and I was talking to, the student board that was in charge of having me come out, and I was like, I just would love to know where that room was. And I'm trying to go by memory. Again, 4 years later, by memory, trying to remember where that one room was. Come to find out, my room is still there. They never touched it. They separated it from that whole section that they remodeled. So now this room, the only way to get to it is this old staircase. So I get to go back, and I'm excited about this. They let me set up equipment overnight, and I go back the next morning, get my equipment, get home, start reviewing everything that happened in that room overnight, and the damnedest stuff happened. You can actually hear in one of the recordings what sounds like a woman pounding on the door screaming, "Let me out, let me out." You can hear what sounds like a train coming up the train tracks, like you're at a depot, a train depot, but there's no train nearby. Yeah. And so it's just amazing some of the things that I captured in these recordings, and you can hear somebody walking around, a door open and close, and the only way to get to that one room is go up this old creaky staircase. The only thing you can hear on the recorder to validate the experience was you'll hear me go up, set the recorder up, you hear me leave, and then you hear me come back. No one else went up there. But yet there's all this crazy stuff happening in these recordings. Yeah. Yes?
So, what is the distinction, or is there, when you hear somebody talk about ghosts versus demons or demonic energy, or something more evil, or is there?
Well,
in your opinion?
there is when you bring the religious aspect to it. I don't bring religion into my field, because if you are going to truly try to be scientific, you cannot be biased when it comes to a lot of religious beliefs. If they say it's demons, then that means you have to believe in angels as well. So that opens a whole other realm to the paranormal. And so I have always, and I think this is one of the things that has made me very successful in this field, is I've always stripped things down to the simplest phenomena. All right? Let's not call this a poltergeist case, level 13. What the hell is a level 13 poltergeist phenomenon? All right? Does anybody know? I don't. But you gotta understand that people want to label things, and they feel like they've understood it, they've conquered it. Because I've now labeled it, it's got my flag and stamp of approval. Now, unfortunately, they're not always right. Right? No one in this field is an expert, as much as they like to say they are. There's experience. All right? If I was going to go to somebody in the paranormal field, I would want to go after somebody who has the experience, because we don't have all the answers. This field goes so far into metaphysical elements and so far into technical elements that everybody has their own theories and ideas of what could be going on with that. And it really muddies up the water. All right? So until there is a standard when it comes to ghost hunting, we are always going to be second guessing what other people bring to the table. So when it comes to demonic elements or just paranormal elements, you have to strip it down to what is actually occurring. Because again, we're taught that if we experience something odd, it's got to be demonic. And a lot of people are going to be biased to their own beliefs, or their own upbringing. So you really can't do that in the field of paranormal research.
So are like possessions, like when you're showing something, how does that fit in?
Well, possession, you can easily be possessed by a positive energy as well. There's a lot of cases out there.
Yeah.
People have been possessed by their loved one after they passed away.
Okay.
So just because somebody's possessed does not mean that it's demonic. But somebody would come in and say, oh, well, that's just the ghost or the demon fooling you to think that it's Uncle Judd inside of you. So it's so easy to turn that around as well.
So is it, in ghost hunting, it's usually, so the way you think about it is it's a person or an energy that was once alive?
I would say yes.
Okay.
I'm going to go with popular belief.
Okay.
Even though there's other people that say, oh, it could be an entity that never lived before.
Okay.
Again, when it comes to the paranormal, the balloon gets bigger and bigger and bigger with ideas and theories. All right. I like to go with what we know and not with what we think we know. All right. So strip it down to the simplest form. What are you really experiencing? And go with that. Okay? I hope that helps.
No, that's interesting.
Okay. All right, her and then you. All right.
Gosh, I just was trying to remember the woman that lived in Yelm that channeled grandpa. Is it J.Z. Knight?
Yeah, J.Z.
Did you
Knight.
ever meet her?
Never met her. But
You
she's. I talk about her in my book, Tacoma's Haunted
You
History.
don't hear anything of her anymore.
No,
I've driven
no.
by her place. I used to,
And it's surprising because the paranormal's made this big comeback, and especially psychic phenomena and
She was
stuff
very
like that.
popular.
Yeah, she was very popular back in the 70s, early 80s.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about her until
J.Z. Knight.
Yeah, until you mentioned it, I'm like, oh yeah.
The TNT
Yeah.
did a big expose on her about 10 years ago.
But you gotta also understand too, the field has become very competitive, and what the media is helping to produce are these younger people coming in as experts in the paranormal. When these people had no credibility or history in the paranormal until the paranormal shows came out. I have history in this field. You can look me up. I was doing this stuff before the ghost hunting shows came out. But the fact of the matter is, you get so many younger people because that's what the audience wants. The audience wants to be entertained, and they want to find people that are going to entertain you, but whether or not they have any interest or any credibility when it comes to the paranormal. And so a lot of the older people that have been doing this, when they still had to be in the closet as paranormal investigators, are now being pushed aside. And that's what's sad. That's one of the things I'm working to try and help people understand where our roots come from. When you mention ghost hunting, you could say, Harry Price, Lloyd Arbach, or Hans Holzer, and most of the people will look at you and go, huh? Who's that? Those are the people that paved the roads for us ghost hunters. And it's sad they don't know about that. They think ghost hunting started when ghost hunters appeared on, Sci-Fi Channel. Or now because the Warrens are being credited for, the Conjuring films. They
Better
become
with ghost facers on Supernatural.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's where this is why I like doing what I'm doing here, because I want to educate people to understand it goes way beyond that. We have a lot more history to this field, and unfortunately, it's again the waters have gotten really muddy now. Yes.
I have just a little story about, because of course I was really skeptic, right?
Mhm.
My friend lost her daughter at 20, at age 20, a week after she got married. Her and her husband were heading to the East Coast when we got the phone call that she passed away. And at her funeral, she had red roses. She had another wedding. She also had another funeral. And Shirley was drying them. She had them all in a closet, drying the ones from the wedding, and then she put the ones from the funeral. About a week later, she said every night Christina would come visit her. That's her daughter's name. And I hadn't seen her because they just wanted to be a family. So when I did come to see her, we were talking, and she brought me into the other room. where the roses were being hung, and she opened the closet to get something, and one of them bloomed.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That's
And to
amazing.
this day, I still remember it. They were all dried, but one of them had dried, but it had bloomed at the same time.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes.
Cool.
And then after that, she never saw her. Her
Mhm.
daughter never visited her again.
Mhm.
But, she kept that. Of
And
course,
that's
she
her
kept
way
it
of
in the
saying
Bible.
goodbye.
It was.
Yeah, sad.
So I wasn't skeptical after that.
That's an amazing story.
It really is. I still tear up, and it's been 20-some years.
Cool. Well, any other questions before we call it a night?
So, what was the conference or the?
It's the Port Gamble Ghost Conference. It's
Yeah.
over on the peninsula in Port Gamble, and they do tours and talks, and it was fascinating and terrifying for me personally. I don't know if you saw me. I was plugging my ears during the audio and stuff because I'll give myself nightmares. But it was really interesting, and there were hunters who'd go out with the tours, and they had their equipment and.
Yeah, like I said, I will be speaking. They've vaccinated this year. Because they now are doing it in November. Usually do it in October, and October I'm all over the place. It's hard for me to commit to anything locally.
And it's usually the weekend of the big writing conference that most of us go to, so people aren't able to go usually.
All right. Well, again, thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed it.